And with that, we look forward to John's fourth class.
Good morning. Today I'm going to behave myself and stay behind the podium, not run around. Okay, so where are we in our creation sequence? Remember, the big picture here is I'm saying, that the creation sequence appears 7 times in the Bible, which is almost a predictable number. And within those 7 times, there's a wonderful structure that God creates 3 things: a world by which he mimics the development of the disciple, a people for himself, and a house for himself, a temple. God also creates Jesus according to the creation sequence. That's what we're going to look at right now. And Jesus likewise creates us as the new spiritual creation. That's why he's the first fruits of the spiritual creation and also the creator of it. We saw yesterday how he created a people. The letters to the 7 churches are styled entirely according to the creation sequence, and he creates a temple as well. So we've looked at sequences 1, 2, and 6. Quite a bit left to do. I apologize for this class because we're going to go at breakneck speed in order to get it done. This class used to be 5 classes, so it's somewhat compressed, to say the very least. If it helps, as I say, all of those 5 classes are published as a book, which you're very welcome to have. I've got 1 copy here, which I'll just leave for whomever wants it. And then in the exhortation, we'll look at cycles number 3 and 7. What is the cycle itself? It is, of course, as we built yesterday, and if you're new this morning, you may not have seen this. Day 1 is light, separated from darkness. Day 2 is fresh water, separated from salt water. Day 3 is land, fruitful land, separated from sea. In each case, division, 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 division from something life-giving with something that is deadly. Then God steps it up. This was in heaven, sea, and earth. God goes back to heaven, sea, and earth, and he populates each region. Populates heaven, populates seas, populates earth. So the God who divides, divides, divides is the God who multiplies, multiplies, multiplies. There's a lot of structure here. Very simple, but it's showing God is doing this very carefully and to get our attention. Now, the light has a function to rule. It's the light to govern your day and govern your night. The populations of the sea includes the serpent, who will show up in Genesis 3, who will show up in Job 41, who will show up in Revelation. And the population of the earth includes a, quote, perfect man, a new man, a man to actually lead everything. Adam in the first case, and others, of course, to follow. So that's the structure we're looking at, all pointing towards an ultimate time of unity and peace on the third, the highest level at God's throne. It's the Gospel of John we're going to be principally looking at this morning, because that's the gospel in which we'll meet Jesus, because the Gospel of John is massively different from the other 3 Gospels. Everybody knows that. The question is why? My simple answer is because John wants to present Jesus according to the creation sequence. Why? To show that in the way, Jesus is the whole world. It's an almost childishly simple thing to say, but it's a beautiful and it's an accurate thing to say. Jesus is the whole world. And in Jesus is everything that's valuable, is everything that's beautiful that's made by God, and Jesus himself is the creator of us when he leads the way for us to become disciples in that same pattern. Here we go. Spiritual creation. Thank you. We said that. Jesus is the new creation, and Jesus, the new creator, creates us as new creations. We're going to try and do these 2 at the same time. I'll really focus on showing how the Gospel of John presents this one. This is kind of going to come by implication. That's what, like I say, this used to be 5 classes, so something has to kind of fall by the wayside. So I suggest to you that if you look at the Gospel of John, the first 3.5 chapters are all day 1. What do we expect there? Light. You will find all the stories about light in John chapters 1 to halfway through chapter 3. What was our symbol for light? What did we say light represented? Understanding. So the focus, so that there'll be spiritual indicators of light or physical indicators of light in the chapters, but the real subject matter will be who gets this, and equally importantly, who doesn't get this? It's not just light, but it's light separated from darkness. And that's what we find. Here's John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. It won't surprise you. In the beginning. You're going to start something by saying in the beginning. You're kind of mimicking Genesis already, aren't you? And that's not an accident. And we start with light, and that light is Jesus. And it's not just light, just like Genesis 1, it's light separated from darkness. The light shines in the darkness has not understood. And that's what really reinforces the idea that light, this is not my idea that it represents understanding, this is God's idea, because God says darkness represents those who do not understand. By definition, therefore, light is the understanding and those who do understand. And then we meet Israel. Now, is this a coincidence? It might be. I don't want to go too far. But in this first section of John's Gospel, Israel, who are of course 12 tribes, ask 12 questions. And although questions is a good way to learn, questions in a way represents people who don't understand. If you understand something, you don't ask questions about it. And so they ask 12 questions. Who are you, John the Baptist? What then? Are you Elijah? Are you the prophet? Blah, 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 blah. I won't need to read them all out. They're all on the screen in front of you if you want. Have a look just at the last one. This is a member of the Sanhedrin, a member of the ruling class, spiritually ruling class, Nicodemus, a good man, and a leading light, so he's supposed to be. And he's absolutely in the dark about anything that Jesus is talking about. How can these things be? Nicodemus says, I just don't get anything that you're talking about. Israel is in the dark. And yet the first thing that Jesus says, come, Jesus replies, and you will see. You only see when the light's switched on. So that's a nice play into that metaphor, a deliberate maintenance of that metaphor of light and darkness. Jesus is the light, so it says here, Jesus helps his disciples see from the light, and Israel don't get anything that's going on. There's 12 questions. They're in the darkness. And one of the key stories that happens in the early chapters of John is the wedding at Cana. And the point, people say, water turns into wine, magnificent. Yeah, that's the real physical iconic point. But the real point of the miracle was, who understands what I'm doing? And what Jesus is doing is he's showing how the law is inadequate and his ministry will be powerful. Often you see symbols. It's a clever symbol. I've seen a bottle of water and it's being poured out and it becomes wine about halfway down. It's a nice mimic of water turning into wine, but it's wrong in a very important way. Jesus never changed drinking water into wine. That wasn't drinking water. That was washing water. That was, if you like, bath water. He took bath water and turned it into wine. What's the difference, you say? The difference is so important because what they had before the law, bath water, shower water, only touches you on the outside. It can only clean you on the outside. You can perform the functions of the law with your mind totally elsewhere. You shouldn't, but you could. It's an external thing. And Jesus says, what I'm giving you is going to touch you and touch you very powerfully. It's going to change you from the inside. Washing water changes a man from the outside, but wine changes a man from within. Now, who says that water represents the Mosaic law, and who says this wine represents the life in Christ? Unfortunately, we've zoomed over that part, so I won't be able to give you those justifications, but they do occur in the notes I can send you if you wish. But the point was this. Who understood what was going on? When the steward of the feast, those in charge, tasted the water now become wine, he did not know where it came from. But the servants who had drawn the water, they knew. And you might say, well, that's a crazy comment. Of course the servants knew where it came from. They're the ones who physically went and got it. But what's really being taught is not a physical reality, but a spiritual one. The common people understood that Jesus was of God. But the rulers of the feast, the Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes, they looked at Jesus and they did not know where he came from. If you doubt me, look later. We'll go from day chapter 1 and we'll have a little peek into John chapter 9. Guess what? That's day 4. No surprise. Because day 1 links to day 4. We expect them. They're both the operations in heaven. And in day 4, look how the language is identical. Now I realize that's English and it's in Greek. It's identical in the original language as well. We know, says the Pharisees, that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man Jesus, we do not know where he comes from. Identical language, it's not an accident, to the rules of the feast. We just don't know where this man comes from. We're completely in the dark as to who and what he is. But the common people understood. They heard him gladly. They received him gladly. Light and darkness, that's our day 1. The rulers of the feast are clueless, the servants knew. And there's another nice little detail here. Jesus meets Nicodemus, who is a member of the Jewish ruling council. Look when he comes to Jesus. He came to Jesus in the darkness, right? No one's interested in the time of day. It was thousands of years ago. Who cares what time of day it was? It matters because it's reproducing the pattern. The man from the darkness comes in the darkness. How can this be? Nicodemus asked. You're Israel's teacher, says Jesus. Why do you not understand these things? Why are you not illuminated? Nicodemus is in the dark, just like the rules of the feast. But the common people, like a Samaritan woman, socially one of the underclass, when Jesus meets her, it was noonday. Again, do we care? Physically, no, but spiritually, yes. It was the brightest time of day. It was about the 6th hour at noon when the Samaritan woman came. Nicodemus comes at night, the woman comes at noon. Nicodemus is in the dark as to who Jesus is, but the woman gets it right away. Sir, the woman said, I can see. Notice the metaphor there. I can see. And what can she see? I can see that you're a prophet. The Samaritan woman is illuminated. And so light and darkness, we can see the Gospel of John is written entirely up to this point according to creation's day 1. John 1 through 3.5. I am the light of life. And it's all about who understands who Jesus is and who's in the dark. We move on. What's going to come next in day 2? Someone tell me? Water. Has to be. So you're turning the pages, you're halfway through John chapter 3, and says, I know what's next. It's got to be water. And sure enough, it is. And curiously, who shows up halfway through John chapter 3? Most bizarre appearance. John the Baptist. What on earth is he doing there? Because John, in a nice chronological fashion, John the Baptist belongs right at the beginning, pre-Jesus, and then Jesus comes and John disappears. And that's how it happens in all the chronological Gospels. But because day 2 represents life out of death, of which baptism is our best symbol, with water, right? John the Baptist shows up halfway through chapter 3. Otherwise, that would be bizarre. According to the creation pattern, that makes perfect sense. But our key story is meeting the woman at Jacob's well, the woman who understands who Jesus is. Sorry for the limited artwork. That's as far as my artistry extends. That's not a Monet or a Picasso or a Dali either. Tragically, that's a Popel, and that's as good as it gets. And here we are, and the question is, who supplies water to whom? Well, she draws water for Jesus. Yes and no, but Jesus tells us, look, everyone who drinks this water coming from the bottom of the well will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I will give him will never thirst. The water I give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. And here's our first mention, of course, should be our second, but that it's not that Jesus is creating disciples and is showing that he is the creation. He is also the creator. So Jesus is the living water. He's about to say that. But he also says, I'm making you into springs of water. Springs of water are no use unless someone else is drinking from them. So he's showing himself to be the perfect creation, but also giving a directive to us that we have to develop the same way he does. He that comes from above is above all. He that is of the earth is earthly. There's a lovely little thing hidden here, a little jewel that we hide here. Look at the actual choreography. Here at the bottom, is fresh water, like the water above. Fresh water, life-giving water. And then there's a divide, just like creation's day 2. But above is something even better than earth's best. Just like Jesus' wine was even better than any wine anyone had ever tasted, so even this fresh water, which we drink and gives us life temporarily, is exceeded by Jesus above. Just like creation's day 2, now even earth's best is way behind the living water which gives us life eternally, which Jesus represents. It's nicely encased there. And then we don't have time to look at this, I'm afraid, but just to demonstrate to you, all the stories about water are crammed together in this part because it's day 2. We have raising up to life, life out of death. The nobleman's son is raised up to death. The man at the pool of Bethesda is raised up. He's lying by a pool for 38 years. We can go through that later. I'm afraid we won't have. And the day 2 finishes by talking about life after death in the most complete form of all, by talking about resurrection. Just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whomever he's pleased to give it. So this all makes sense because we're in day 2. Life out of death, fresh water out of salt water. That's what happened in Genesis 1. It's happening here in the ultimate spiritual sense. We've had 4 stories about water back to back, right? We've had John baptizing at Salem. We have the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well, the water. We have the man lying at the pool of Bethesda. That's the 3rd one. And the 4th one is the one I've forgotten, but you'll find it when you look in there. It's in there somewhere. It's all about life after death, and he talks about resurrection at this point. Everyone who's in the graves will hear Jesus' voice and come out. Those either to eternal life or to condemnation. It's all about resurrection. So there's our day 2. And Jesus says, I am the living water. Can you see what's happening here? Jesus says on day 1, I am the light of life. Jesus says on day 2, I am the living water. We don't need to have huge brains to predict. What's coming up in day 3? Light, water, what? Bread. Light, water, bread. Right, we've learned the sequence. Yellow, blue, green in the colors I've chosen. Mainly because I'm a bachelor and when I get home to my fridge, the bread will probably be green. Light, water, bread, right? Light, water, food. I am the light of life, says Jesus. I am the water, I am the living water of Jesus, says Jesus. What's he going to say? What's coming up in the Gospel of John? What's he bound to say? The bread of life. You see, you don't even need to read the Gospel. You read Genesis 1, you know what's coming because God uses this powerful pattern to spell his name, and his name is spelled most clearly in his Son. So day 3, John 6, and really running halfway through John 7, Jesus crossed to the far shore of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him. Do you notice what happens there? Light, water, bread. In that sequence, light, water, bread. In order to take the bread with Jesus, what did the great crowd of people have to do? To follow him how, Robert? You're right. Listening him to coming to an understanding. Yep. Across the water. You had to go across the water. Jesus gives bread to those on the other side of the water. There's the same pattern, isn't it? That's why we share our bread with the baptized. And we're going to talk about probably people being baptized a little bit later on today, which is fabulous. In order to eat the bread with Jesus, you have to cross a body of water. It's very subtly inlaid, isn't it? But listen to the little words. The little patterns are always there. And that's always, to bear bread, the earth, first, remember the sea water covered the whole planet. And so God brought up the land. Before it could bear bread, it had to come out of the water. It's a physical reality, a scientific reality, as well as a wonderful symbol. So the earth was baptized. It was pulled out of the waters so that it could bear bread. And we've seen it in the patterns we've already looked at, right? In order to eat the manna in the wilderness, you had to first cross the Red Sea. You had to be baptized in the cloud and in the sea, and then the bread from heaven came to you. Always the same. To eat the bread of communion, we first cross the waters of baptism. 4 patterns, every single one the same, because God speaks to us repeatedly in the same way to get our attention. I am the living bread. So, well predicted. Good job. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. Jesus said, had the people sit down, and he took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to the people. So, did he give the people? There's another little hint. There's a little detail hiding in here, and I've underlined the words to make it nice and easy. See, he didn't give the bread to everyone. To whom did he give the bread? What's magical about being seated? Well, because you're sitting can be. I can listen when I'm standing up, though. I'll fight back here. Right? What's special about being sitting down in this instance? Yeah, Hannah's got it. It's because what Jesus told them to do. If Jesus says stand up, stand up. Jesus says sit down, sit down. Jesus says do a cartwheel, I'll try my best. Right? So the interesting thing is, yeah, you've crossed the water to the other side. Great job. But are you still listening to Jesus? Sit down, says Jesus. No, I'm fine. I'm all right. Well, he didn't give the bread to that person. Maybe they all sat down, I don't know. Have the people sit down. He distributed the bread to whoever did what he had said, whether it's stand up, sit down, or whatsoever. Jesus only gave the bread, he only gave the bread to those who'd crossed beyond the water and followed his instructions on the other side. And again, it's so easily hidden. You can fly through those verses and not see that. But it's quite important, I think, every detail that we notice. So he gives them bread. Now, I think we covered this before. I think it's the only thing that bread represents in the Bible. What's the only thing it's ever said to represent? Oh, the body of Christ. Yep, that was the other one. Whoops. I'm batting 1,000 here, aren't I? What? God's word. Yes. So as Jesus is giving them physical bread, he's also, the text says, he's teaching them, right? So he's giving them physical bread, he's giving them spiritual bread. And he gives them another command, just like the sit down command. He says, gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost. Why? Who cares? There's crumbs on the ground. Seriously, I'm going to have to pick them up? Jesus says so, I guess, but bread isn't litter. It's biodegradable. It's not going to cause a problem. But Jesus wants those pieces picked up. Can anyone see why? Please. There's definitely, that's a broader principle in which that's included. I like that answer. That's good. Alden, please. Oh, which is on the same theme. I like that. Yes, don't let anything get away. And in this case, what specifically shouldn't be getting away? What is it that these crumbs that have hit the ground represent? Yeah, the word. Don't you think? He's giving them bread and he's giving them words. And the bread, if you eat anything like me, about 30% is on the ground, right? And the words, Jesus is speaking. And the people hear, some of them. Maybe the people hear all of them and say, well, I like that bit. I'll do that bit. That's good. Well, Jesus says, nah, all of it. Eat the whole lot. Do not pick and choose. You want to go out there to a buffet and pick and choose? That's fine. That's physical food. But when Jesus gives you words, you don't let any of them fall to the ground. Natural nourishment and spiritual nourishment. Jesus is saying, do not let the words of God fall to the ground and be wasted. Eat the whole thing. This is for the glory of the chef. We grow up in a society where serve the customer is paramount. Here, it's serve the chef, and you eat all of what's put in front of you. Who did that? Really tricky question. Who made sure that none of the words of God fell to the ground? Please, Robert. God. That's right. But which human actually did it? Which human is renowned for doing that? Robert, what were you going to say? Old Testament character. Moses is a good guess. Maybe it does say it about Moses. Right. That's right. You had to eat it all that day. Elijah's an excellent guess. Moses and Elijah are key characters. And it may be said about them. I can't tell you I've read every single verse, but I certainly remember one of them. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and Samuel let none of God's words fall to the ground. What a beautiful metaphor. Words don't fall to the ground, and yet they do, right? If you ignore them, if you don't hear them, if you're like, yeah, whatever, they fall to the ground. So I see quite a similarity between what Samuel did and what Jesus is instructing his followers to do. Do not let even the fragments of what I'm telling you fall to the ground. And to enforce that physically, I'm going to make you perform this parable where you're even going to pick up the crumbs of the physical bread to show that you understand what I'm telling you. All of God's words must be taken in, not just those which suit our appetite. Fantastically, the word words is missing. That's annoying. And thus we complete day 3. I am the light of life. I am the water of life. I am the bread of life. That's a clue in case we hadn't picked up that John was presenting Jesus according to the creation pattern. Light, water, bread. Light of life, water of life, bread of life. What else does he say? I am the something of life. Correct answer. There's nothing else. Well done. You all got that one. It's just those 3. So I haven't cherry-picked. It's not like he says this 17 times and I've cherry-picked the 3 that match my pattern. These are the 3, the only 3. Light, water, bread. That's what tells you that it's Jesus. He divides, he divides, he divides. Now, remember we said right from Genesis 1, light, water, bread, the 3, light, water, food, right? The 3 essentials to stay alive. Therefore, in the new creation, what are the 3 essentials to stay alive? Light, water, bread is a fair answer. Well, you're catching me out with these literals. I like it. I can't say no, can I? I'm trapped. If Jesus has said, I'm the light of life, I'm the water of life, I'm the bread of life, what are the 3 things you need to stay alive? It's true, and in the representations we have, but Horace, say that again 3 times.
Jesus. The Messiah, Jesus.
That's right. No, you need Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus. And it's almost humor on God's part there, but I think he's saying, hey, you know what you need to stay alive? Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus. Right? With a side salad of Jesus. Right? That's what you need to stay alive. And that's beautiful. I find that very powerful and very simple. It's a question people find hard to get because the answer is just too simple. And that's the beautiful little gem. Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus is what we need to stay alive. Where are we now? And this is just in passing. Realize we're not just looking at Jesus and marveling, which we are, but also realize we have the commission from him. You are the light of the world, says Jesus. And you're like, no, I thought you said you were. Yes, says Jesus, I am the light of the world. I am the light of life. Now you go be the light of the world. Let your light shine so that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Whoever drinks of this water, we looked at this, will become a spring of water. A spring of water feeds other people. Jesus said to Philip in the chapter we were, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Jesus asked this only to test Philip. So your job is going to be feeding. Right now I'll do it. But the day is coming when it's your job. My light must shine. I must supply living water as a spring. I must feed others. The commission is there as well. We're passing over that cycle very briefly, but it's just as important as what we're looking at with Jesus. Jesus, the new creation. So what comes next? Well, pick it up in halfway through John chapter 7 and run through John chapter 13, day 4. How is Jesus going to look in day 4? Tell me. a king. There's going to be a governing, a ruling element. Absolutely. I think king is going to come out strongly in this sixth part, but you're still right. What else are we going to see? What are we going to see a repeat of? Anyone spot the color? Yes. Light. Very good. We're going to see, it's the ruling light, right? The light to rule the day. So Jesus is going to be seen. We're going to get a little echo of the light. We're going to see a little reflection from day one, but it's now going to have some sort of ruling element to it. Is that what we find? I am the light of the world. That's John chapter 8. And you're going to say, I thought it was John chapter 1. Yes, it is. It's both. This one is repeated. You get a little reflection. The yellow comes back. We've seen it there. I'm the light of the world, John chapter 1. I'm the light of the world, John chapter 8. Whoever follows me isn't in darkness, they're in light. It's a repeat of day one, exactly as we anticipated from the model. Just like the sun and moon come back to refine the light from day one in Genesis 1. But this time we expect a bit more. We expect rulership. We expect governance. We expect judgment. I came into this world for judgment, and judgment in terms of light and dark, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. I'm turning the lights on and off. You think you see? No, you're blind. You think you're blind? No, I'll help you see. And that's how Jesus is presented in day 4 of the chapters of John's Gospel. The main story, unsurprisingly, is the story of the man born blind. And we have the rulers of the feast again. The Pharisees are there, and they're in the dark, as always. And we have the man born blind. We know that God has spoken to Moses. As for Jesus, we don't know where he comes from. We saw that in day 1, didn't we? This is day 4. That's a reflection of what we saw back in day 1. We looked at these two verses in day 1. Here we are in day 4. It's the same too. Jesus, we don't know where he comes from. We're in the dark. And who's in the light? Of course, irony of ironies and a nice reversal of the physical world, it's the man born blind who's in the light. He's the one who sees Jesus. If this man were not from God, he couldn't do any of this. It's obvious. The man born blind sees so clearly what's going on. The man born blind is illuminated. He knows that Jesus is from God. And this is back from day 1. We saw this on an earlier slide. Do you remember when we walked into the Gospel of John? Israel asked 12 questions in day 1. Who are you? What then? Ending with Nicodemus's 12th question. How can these things be? You read the story of the man born blind, and the Pharisees are throwing questions at Jesus and at the man born blind. Nice, easy question, because even if you don't know the answer, you know the answer. How many questions do you think they throw out? 12. Might just be a coincidence, but I don't think so. And there you are. Those are the 12 questions. You can read through them or not as yourself. Just trust me, they're there. Day chapter 4 reflects day chapter 1. 12 questions from the rules of the feasts, 12 questions from the rules of the feasts. They're in the dark. They have no idea what's going on. We push on quickly. I am the light of the world, but my judgment is true. Light with judgment, the light to rule your day, the light to rule your night. And we've arrived at John chapter 13. We're barreling through this gospel faster than surely you've ever seen it presented before. Oh, too fast. I'm sorry about that. Day 5. What happens in day 5? Nice and easy. Death. Day of death. Day of the serpent. Day of the victory of sin temporarily. All of those things. Death is the simplest and best answer. Absolutely. Is that what we see? Unfortunately. Guess who wanders into day 5? The devil. And we understand what's meant by that. But how interesting. That's exactly the right person to walk into the beginning of day 5, the day of death. The devil walks in. Good morning. He says the devil had already prompted Judas to betray Jesus. Well worthy of mention as an iconic character of day 5. You know the way to the place where I'm going, says Jesus. And the disciples all reply, Thomas represents them, Lord, we have no idea what you're talking about. Suddenly the disciples sound like the Pharisees. Even the disciples are beginning to slip away into the darkness. They kept asking, what does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying. We don't understand. Our light is going out. He's saying things and we're no longer connecting with him at all. And finally, or en route, you're one of his disciples, aren't you? Challenges the serving girl. Peter replies, oh no, I'm nothing to do with him. Absolute disconnect, total denial, and finally, death. It is fulfilled. With that, Jesus bows his head and gives up his spirit. And day five has a link to day 2, and we know the nature of the link. They're opposites. Life out of death, death in life. Couldn't be opposite. So we might expect to see something here which reflects in opposite day 2, and we do. In day 2, everything Jesus says picks people up, spiritually and physically. Then Jesus says in day 2, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And at once the man who has never walked, has always been horizontal, pops up to the vertical. Jesus picks him up. And Jesus picks people up spiritually as well. Many of his words, and because of Jesus' words, many people became believers. Day 5, the opposite. That's possibly why that weird little detail is there. Did you ever notice that? If it's so weird, you don't notice it, right? They come into is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Judas and his mob show up, and they're looking for Jesus, and Jesus says, I'm he, and they all fell over. It's almost cartoonishly comical, except it's very serious. Why did they all fall over? They all fell over because it's the complete perfect opposite. Whenever Jesus speaks in day 2, all the people who've never been able to stand jump up. But in day 5, when Jesus speaks, all the evil people who are vertical, all fall down, like they're dead. Yeah, they all fell to the ground. It's an easy verse to miss because it's so small. And in the same way, spiritually, when Jesus speaks in day 5, even his loving disciples, they don't understand what's going on. So it's the actual genuine opposite from day 2 to day 5, exactly as we were told in Genesis 1. Jesus' words lift people up in day 2, but cast them to the ground in day 5. So there's day 5. And what do we learn from day 5? Jesus is dead. It's the day of death. It's the serpent's day. But the serpent's day isn't the last day. We thank our God for that, because there's one more day. Day 6, the last 2 chapters of the Gospel of John. What do we expect to find? We expect to find a new man, like Adam, like Joshua, those new men that we've seen that have come along to lead us into the promised land. What do we see after the crucifixion? That's pretty easy. We see the resurrection. And Thomas says to Jesus, my Lord and my God. I don't need to editorialize that. I'll just note, Jesus never corrected him. Jesus never said, "Ooh, don't say that." It's not what happened. Thomas says, I look to you and I see my God. And you can see the Father in the Son, because the Son is such a perfect representation of the Father. Thomas finally sees what he should always have seen. I will place on Messiah's shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. That's way back from Isaiah. It's clearly talking about Messiah, and it's talking about he'll get this magic key that opens and shuts doors. Okay, fine. And it's metaphorical to some extent. What do you remember happening with respect to doors at the time of the resurrection? The graves were open. That's an excellent answer. I like that one better than the one I've got. We'll put that in there. What else? Robert? The curtain was ripped open. We're going to look at that during the exhortation. Hold that idea. That's a fine answer. Even more literally, the tomb. Yeah, exactly. And that's a parallel to all those 3 answers. Absolutely in key. That's what we're going to come to. Yeah, it's a simple, almost little David Blaine style cheap trick, but it's not a cheap trick, because we know we'll be showing for some reason we need to be shown, as Jonathan remembers, the disciples locked themselves in a room, understandably, because they were in great danger for their lives, and Jesus comes straight through the locked door, John chapter 20, verse 19. Just in case you missed it, 7 days later, and nicely 7 verses later, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood amongst them. Just bothers to emphasize there's no door locked to Jesus. He is the key holder of the house of David. There's no door locked for him. And he even shows that physically, even before the better metaphorical answer of the tomb and the veil and the graves that are opened. Because when the grave door locks on you, you're locked in. Not when Jesus is around. He's got the key. That's what we're learning here. Finally, there is the one of the tomb, actually, Horst. Finally, finally, the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He went through the doorway, and for him, that doorway was a real doorway. He saw and believed. What a beautiful statement. What a tragic statement. But that's the point where he believed. Jesus had been telling him for 3.5 years, I will be killed and rise from the dead. And John was like, sure, what? And he finally goes through the doorway, the door that Jesus opened, and believes. And we know that day 3 is connected to day 6. This is the nourishment day, right? So we might expect to find some connection between day 3 and day 6. And there is. In the Gospel of John, 2 times there's a meal of bread and fish. One's in day 3, one's in day 6. Jesus takes 5 loaves and gives them to those who were sat down, like he'd asked, and same with the 2 fish. And then on the beach, there's a fire of burning coals, and Jesus says, come and have breakfast, and there's a meal of bread and fish. And they're on different levels, yep. This is the plane of division. This is the plane of multiplication. I might be overstretching this, but it's interesting to note the God who divides, the God who multiplies. Here, there's only 2 fish, and there's about 5,000 people. And so obviously these fish are very much divided amongst the people. You think they'd get nothing each, but they all eat what they want. And finally, there's 153 fish, plus the fish that Jesus bought, which we're not told how many, and they're shared between 7 people in the boat, plus Jesus. So this is a God who multiplies many, many more fish than people. So maybe that's stretching the point, but it's the nice little comparisons that we see. So finally, day 6, Jesus is raised, and he feeds his people. Finally, he enters God's peace, and behind it all, we've seen it several times this weekend, the Gospel of John, clearly, when you go through it at that speed, you can get the sort of big picture view, is written to present Jesus according to the name of God. I spell out my name, says God, and even my Son comes to be. That is the way by which my Son is formed. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father, says Jesus. How? That's how. Because he's the one who did everything his Father did and presented in Genesis chapter 1. So you read Genesis chapter 1, and you're supposed to see Jesus. And we do. And that's why Jesus is there in that pattern from the foundation of the world, as many commentators and biblically inspired commentators have said. Jesus works in heaven. I am the light of the world. The light of the world, my judgment is true. Jesus works in seas. You'll notice that the matching case there is the idea of my joy is complete. He speaks of his baptism. He speaks of baptism. My joy is complete. He speaks of death. That's life out of death. That's death in life. And the theme of nourishment in the earth days, Jesus provides a meal of bread and fish. Not once, but twice. Once with great division, once with great multiplication. So it is very, very neat, very tidy, very symmetric, very beautiful. God is a God of order, not chaos, and he presents his Son, indeed, according to that order. And that brings us to our final slide, where the numbers 4 and 5 have already fallen away. Good-o. And what we've seen is Jesus, according to those stories that we zipped through with almost terrible haste, the light of the world, the light, the living water above even the earthly fresh water, the provider of bread and nourishment, both physical and spiritual, the light which brought judgment into the world, the death, the dead man, and the key holder of the house of David, just like matching what was said to the letter of Philadelphia, and us called to those same practices in those same verses. And that concludes, I apologize for the breakneck speed, that concludes our Sunday school class. And then for the exhortation, it's a little bit more measured pace. We'll look at the final two sequences of creation, numbers 3 and 7, where God makes a house, a tabernacle, to proclaim his name, and Jesus does exactly the same thing.